The champagne flute slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the country club's grand ballroom. All eyes turned toward me as my father's words echoed through the ornate space. "You're not welcome here, Rebecca. This is a family celebration, and frankly, you've embarrassed us enough." I stood there in my navy dress blues, the same uniform I'd worn with pride for 8 years, the same uniform that had seen me through 3 deployments in the Persian Gulf. The weight of my service ribbons felt heavier than usual against my chest as I watched my younger sister Emma's face crumple with embarrassment. Her wedding day, the day I'd flown back from Norfolk specifically to attend, was turning into a nightmare because of me. "Dad, please," Emma whispered, her white dress rustling as she stepped between us. "She's my sister. She came all this way. She came here with that woman." My father spat. His face flushed red above his expensive tuxedo. His eyes darted toward the entrance where my girlfriend, Captain Maria Delgado, waited, still holding the gift we'd carefully selected together. "I won't have that lifestyle paraded around at my daughter's wedding. What will people think? What will Pastor Morrison say?" The 200 guests had gone silent, their conversations dying mid-sentence as they witnessed our family drama unfold. I could feel their stares burning into me, some sympathetic, others judgmental. Mrs. Henderson from our old neighborhood shook her head disapprovingly, while my college roommate Jessica looked mortified on my behalf. "This lifestyle?" I repeated, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You mean the lifestyle where I've served my country for 8 years? Where I've earned commendations for excellence in naval intelligence? Where I've sacrificed everything, including time with family, to protect people like you?" My father's jaw tightened. "Don't you dare make this about your service. This is about your choices, Rebecca. About how you've turned your back on everything we raised you to believe." I glanced around the ballroom, taking in the faces of relatives who'd once praised my achievements, family friends who'd celebrated when I graduated from the Naval Academy. Now they looked at me like I was a stranger, like the uniform I wore meant nothing compared to who I loved. 8 years, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. 8 years of missing birthdays, holidays, family gatherings because I was serving overseas. And this is what I come home to. Emma reached for my hand, tears streaming down her carefully applied makeup. "Becca, don't go. Please. I want you here. I need you here." But my father stepped forward, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Either she leaves or the wedding is over. I won't have my family's reputation destroyed by this aberration." The word hit me like a physical blow. Aberration. As if my love for Maria, as if everything I'd built in my life, was some kind of mistake. I straightened my shoulders, every inch the naval officer I'd trained to be, and looked my father directly in the eyes. "Fine," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd learned commanding sailors half my age. "But you're making the biggest mistake of your life." I turned toward the exit, my dress shoes clicking against the marble, when the ballroom doors burst open. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the ballroom, as a figure in navy dress whites strode through the entrance. The gold stripes on his sleeves caught the crystal chandelier light, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. Commander James Harrison, my former commanding officer from my last deployment, walked into the room with the bearing of a man accustomed to command. Behind him followed 3 other naval officers, their uniforms immaculate, their presence commanding immediate respect. The conversations that had begun to resume after my confrontation with my father died completely. Even the wedding photographer lowered his camera, sensing something significant was about to unfold. "Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Torres," Commander Harrison's voice boomed across the ballroom, using my full rank and name. "I've been looking for you." My father's face went pale. He knew that tone, that authority. Everyone in the room could sense the shift in atmosphere as these 4 officers positioned themselves near the entrance, their eyes scanning the crowd before settling on me. "Sir," I responded automatically, snapping to attention despite the emotional turmoil churning inside me. Years of military discipline overrode everything else, even in this civilian setting, even in the middle of my personal crisis. Commander Harrison's weathered face broke into a slight smile as he approached. "At ease, Torres. Though I have to say, you look like hell for someone attending a family celebration." The irony in his voice wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Maria had moved closer, her own military bearing evident as she stood straighter, recognizing the gravity of whatever was happening. My sister Emma clutched her bouquet tighter, her eyes darting between me and these unexpected arrivals. "What are you doing here, sir?" I asked, though part of me already suspected this wasn't a coincidence. "Well, that's an interesting story," Commander Harrison said, his voice carrying easily through the silent ballroom. "You see, I received a very concerning phone call yesterday. Someone wanted to verify your service record, your character, your personal life." His eyes moved deliberately to my father, who had gone from red-faced anger to ashen uncertainty. The wedding guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing they were about to witness something unprecedented. Pastor Morrison, who had been preparing to officiate the ceremony, stood frozen near the altar, his Bible clutched in his hands. "It seems," Commander Harrison continued, "that someone was spreading rumors about one of my finest officers. Someone was questioning whether Lieutenant Commander Torres here was fit for duty, whether her personal relationships affected her ability to serve with honor." My father's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. I could see the exact moment he realized what was happening, what he had done. The phone calls he'd made, the inquiries he'd initiated trying to damage my career, had somehow reached my command. "So, naturally," Commander Harrison said, his voice growing colder, "I had to come see for myself what kind of family would question the integrity of an officer who has served with such distinction. An officer who has earned the Navy Commendation Medal, the Combat Action Ribbon, and the respect of every sailor under her command." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, frozen in place as they witnessed this military intervention in what should have been a family celebration. Commander Harrison reached into his jacket and withdrew a manila folder, the kind used for official military correspondence. The sound of paper rustling seemed amplified in the absolute silence of the ballroom. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched him open it with deliberate precision. "You know what I found when I investigated these claims?" he asked, his eyes never leaving my father's face. "I found that Lieutenant Commander Torres has been recommended for promotion to full commander. I found that she's being considered for a position at the Pentagon, working directly with naval intelligence operations that most people in this room don't have clearance to even know exist." He pulled out a document, holding it up so the gold seal was visible even from across the room. "I also found this, a commendation from the Secretary of the Navy himself, praising Lieutenant Commander Torres for her exceptional service during Operation Enduring Freedom. Her intelligence work directly saved the lives of over 300 American servicemen and women." My father stumbled backward, his face now completely drained of color. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I had never told my family about that operation, about the nights I'd spent analyzing intercepted communications, about the terrorist plot we'd uncovered just hours before. It would have devastated an American convoy. "But here's what really caught my attention," Commander Harrison continued, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet tone that every military person in the room recognized as far more dangerous than shouting. "I discovered that someone had been calling my office, calling the Pentagon, trying to initiate an investigation into Lieutenant Commander Torres' fitness for duty based on her personal relationships." The folder snapped shut with a sound like a gunshot. Someone was attempting to destroy the career of one of the finest officers I've ever had the privilege to command. Someone was trying to use the military's own systems against her, hoping to force her out of service through harassment and discrimination. My father's expensive tuxedo suddenly looked rumpled, his confident posture crumbling as the weight of his actions became clear. Around the ballroom, I could see the guests beginning to understand the magnitude of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was about honor, service, and the price of prejudice. "Sir," I said quietly, my voice barely audible, "you didn't have to come here." Commander Harrison turned to me, and for a moment, his stern expression softened. "Yes, Torres, I did. Because when someone attacks one of my officers, they attack the entire United States Navy. And when that attack is based on who she chooses to love rather than how she serves her country, it becomes personal." He gestured to the 3 officers behind him. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, Lieutenant Patterson, and Chief Petty Officer Williams all volunteered to accompany me today. They wanted to meet the family of the woman who saved their lives during that operation in the Gulf. They wanted to thank them personally." The room began to spin slightly as the full implications hit me. My father hadn't just tried to humiliate me at my sister's wedding. He had tried to destroy my career, my life's work, everything I had built through years of dedication and sacrifice. And now, Standing in this elegant ballroom surrounded by crystal and flowers, the consequences of his actions were about to unfold in ways none of us had anticipated. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez stepped forward, her own dress uniform pristine despite the long journey. "Ma'am," she said, addressing my father directly, "I need you to understand something. Your daughter didn't just save my life. She saved my entire unit. 23 Marines under my command came home to their families because Lieutenant Commander Torres worked 18-hour days analyzing intelligence data that everyone else said was useless." My father's face had gone from pale to gray. He gripped the back of a nearby chair, his knuckles white against the mahogany. I don't understand. Rebecca never told us about any of this. That's because she's bound by security clearances that prevent her from discussing classified operations," Chief Petty Officer Williams interjected, his voice carrying the authority of 20 years in the Navy. "But what I can tell you is that your daughter is a hero. A real hero. Not the kind you see in movies, but the kind who sits in a windowless room for days, piecing together fragments of intercepted communications to prevent American deaths." Emma had begun crying openly now, her wedding makeup ruined as she stared at me with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. "Becca, why didn't you ever tell us? All these years we thought you just worked at a desk somewhere." "Because that's what classified means," I said quietly, my own emotions threatening to overwhelm the military composure I was struggling to maintain. "I couldn't tell you about the operations, the deployments, the real work. I could only tell you I was serving." Commander Harrison's expression hardened again as he turned back to my father. "But here's where this gets complicated, Mr. Torres. Your phone calls to my office, to the Pentagon, to various military personnel departments. They've created a paper trail that suggests you were attempting to interfere with military operations by targeting one of our officers." The wedding guests had begun whispering among themselves, the magnitude of the situation finally sinking in. Pastor Morrison had set down his Bible and was staring at the scene unfolding before him, clearly out of his depth. The photographer had given up any pretense of capturing wedding memories and was simply watching in stunned silence. "That wasn't my intention," my father stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought if her superiors knew about her lifestyle choices." "Her lifestyle choices?" Lieutenant Patterson spoke for the first time, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "Sir, with all due respect, Lieutenant Commander Torres's personal life is exemplary. She's in a committed relationship with another decorated officer. Captain Delgado has served with distinction in the Air Force for over a decade. They're both patriots who have sacrificed more for this country than most people in this room could ever imagine." Maria stepped forward then, her own military bearing evident as she moved with purpose across the ballroom floor. The guests parted before her, creating a clear path as she approached our group. Her Air Force dress blues were immaculate, her ribbons and decorations telling their own story of service and sacrifice. "Mr. Torres," Maria said, her voice steady and professional, "I need you to understand something. Your daughter and I have both served multiple tours in combat zones. We've both been away from our families, missed holidays, birthdays, and important moments because we chose to serve our country. The only difference between us and the heterosexual couples in uniform is who we come home to." The complications were mounting by the minute, and I could see the wedding celebration dissolving into something far more serious than anyone had anticipated. My father looked around the ballroom desperately, as if searching for support from the guests who had watched this unfold. But the faces staring back at him weren't sympathetic anymore. Mrs. Henderson, who had shaken her head in disapproval earlier, now looked uncomfortable, her eyes fixed on the ribbons across my chest. Uncle Robert, a Vietnam veteran himself, had straightened in his chair, his expression shifting from confusion to something approaching respect. "I didn't know," my father said weakly, his voice breaking. "Rebecca, you never told us any of this. How was I supposed to know?" "Because you never asked," I replied, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "For 8 years, Dad, you never once asked what I actually did in the Navy. You never asked about my deployments, my work, my achievements. All you cared about was whether I was living up to your expectations of who I should be." Commander Harrison stepped closer to my father, his presence commanding absolute attention. "Mr. Torres, your daughter has been protecting classified information that could compromise national security if disclosed. She couldn't tell you about her work even if she wanted to. But what she could tell you about, her character, her dedication, her love for her family, you chose to ignore because of your prejudices. The weight of the moment settled over the ballroom like a heavy blanket. Emma had stopped crying and was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of awe and heartbreak that cut straight through my chest. The sister who had always looked up to me was finally seeing who I really was, but it was happening in the worst possible circumstances. "There's something else," Commander Harrison said, reaching into his jacket again. This time he withdrew a smaller envelope, official Navy correspondence marked with priority classifications. "Lieutenant Commander Torres, I was instructed to deliver this personally." My hands trembled slightly as I took the envelope, breaking the seal under the watchful eyes of everyone in the ballroom. The letter was brief, formal, but its contents made my knees weak. Transfer orders to the Pentagon, effective immediately. The promotion to full commander, pending final approval. Assignment to a joint task force that would put me at the center of naval intelligence operations for the next decade. "This is what your phone calls almost cost her," Commander Harrison said to my father, his voice cutting through the silence. "Not just her career, but a position that maybe 12 officers in the entire Navy are qualified to hold. You almost destroyed something that took her 8 years to build, something that serves the national interest, because you couldn't accept who she loves." Maria moved to stand beside me, her presence steadying me as I processed what I was reading. The transfer would mean leaving Norfolk, leaving the life we'd built together, but it also represented everything I'd worked toward since graduating from the Naval Academy. It was validation, recognition, and opportunity, all wrapped in official Navy letterhead. But as I looked around the ballroom, at my father's devastated face, at Emma's ruined wedding, at the guests who were witnessing the complete implosion of what should have been a celebration, I realized that success in my career felt hollow when my family relationships lay in ruins around me. The choice between duty and family that had defined my entire adult life was crystallizing in this moment, demanding a decision that would reshape everything I thought I knew about myself and what I wanted from life. The envelope crumpled slightly in my grip as the full weight of the moment crashed over me. Here I stood, holding the culmination of my military career, the position I'd dreamed of since my first day at the Naval Academy, while watching my sister's wedding dissolve into chaos around me. The irony was suffocating. I had spent 8 years sacrificing family moments for my service, and now my service was costing me what might be my last chance to repair those relationships. Emma suddenly stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling against the marble floor. "Stop," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Just stop, all of you." Her mascara had left dark tracks down her cheeks, but her voice was steady, determined. "This is my wedding day, and I'm watching my family tear itself apart while strangers tell us who we should be." She turned to our father, her bouquet trembling in her hands. "Dad, I've listened to you complain about Rebecca for years, how she never calls enough, never visits enough, never shares enough about her life. But standing here right now, listening to these officers, I'm realizing that maybe the problem isn't that she doesn't share. Maybe the problem is that we never bothered to really listen." My father's face crumpled, the fight going out of him completely. "Emma, sweetheart, this is your special day. I was just trying to protect what?" Emma's voice rose, surprising everyone in the ballroom. "Protect me from having a sister who serves her country with honor. Protect me from having a role model who's braver than anyone I know, because that's what you've done, Dad. You've spent years making me feel like I had to choose between loving my sister and respecting your opinions." The guests were shifting uncomfortably, some beginning to whisper among themselves. I could see the wedding photographer discreetly packing his equipment, clearly recognizing that this celebration was beyond salvaging. The catering staff had retreated to the edges of the room, uncertain whether to continue their preparations or begin cleanup. Commander Harrison cleared his throat, drawing attention back to the military presence that had transformed this family drama into something much larger. "Miss Torres," he said, addressing Emma directly, "I think there's something you should know about your sister's deployment schedule over the past few years." He pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what appeared to be official records. "Lieutenant Commander Torres has been deployed for a total of 42 months over the past 5 years. She's missed 17 family holidays, including 3 Christmases, 2 Thanksgivings, and your college graduation. But what you might not know is that she's also turned down 4 different shore duty assignments that would have kept her stateside, because she believed the overseas positions were where she could do the most good for her country." The information hit Emma like a physical blow. She staggered slightly, her new husband David finally moving from where he'd been frozen near the altar to steady her. "She missed my graduation by choice?" Emma whispered. "She missed your graduation because she was preventing a terrorist attack on a naval base in Bahrain," Commander Harrison replied quietly. "An attack that would have killed hundreds of American servicemen and women. She made a choice between being there for your personal milestone and saving lives. That's the kind of choice your sister makes every single day." I felt the walls of the ballroom closing in around me, the weight of 8 years of sacrifice and service pressing down on my shoulders like a physical burden. I couldn't breathe. The walls of the ballroom seemed to be closing in as 8 years of hidden sacrifices were laid bare before my family and 200 wedding guests. Emma's face had gone white, her bouquet shaking in her trembling hands as she processed what Commander Harrison had just revealed. The terrorist attack in Bahrain, an operation so classified I could never speak of it, not even to Maria for months afterward. "You chose strangers over your own sister," my father said, his voice barely a whisper, but it carried across the silent room like a gunshot. That was it. The breaking point I'd been approaching for years finally arrived with devastating clarity. I stepped forward, my dress blues suddenly feeling like armor, as I faced the man who had raised me, the man who had never understood the weight of the uniform I wore. "Strangers?" My voice came out steady, controlled, but everyone in the room could hear the fury beneath it. "Dad, those strangers were 19-year-old kids from places like Iowa and Texas and right here in Virginia. They were somebody's sons and daughters, somebody's Emma. And yes, I chose to save their lives instead of watching my sister walk across a stage." The silence stretched between us like a chasm, 8 years of misunderstanding and resentment crystallizing into this single moment. Emma was crying again, but these weren't tears of embarrassment anymore. They were tears of comprehension, of finally understanding the price her big sister had paid for serving something larger than herself. "But here's what you never understood," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "Every single time I made that choice, it broke my heart. Every missed birthday, every holiday I spent in some God-forsaken desert, or on a ship in the middle of the ocean. I thought about you. I thought about Emma. I thought about coming home to a family that would be proud of what I was doing, proud of the sacrifices I was making." Commander Harrison stepped back slightly, recognizing that this moment belonged to my family now. The other officers maintained their positions, but I could see in their faces that they understood what was happening. This wasn't just about military service anymore. This was about the fundamental question of whether love and duty could coexist, whether a family could survive the weight of service and sacrifice. "Instead," I said, looking directly at my father, "I came home to a man who was so ashamed of who I am that he tried to destroy my career. You didn't just reject me, Dad. You tried to weaponize the very institution I've devoted my life to against me." My father's legs seemed to give out, and he sank into a nearby chair, his face buried in his hands. The fight had gone out of him completely, replaced by something that looked like devastating recognition of what he had done, what he had risked losing forever. Emma suddenly moved, her wedding dress trailing behind her as she crossed the ballroom floor. But instead of going to our father or to David, she came straight to me. Without a word, she threw her arms around me, her bouquet falling to the marble floor as she held me tight. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry I never knew. I'm so sorry I never asked." The weight of Emma's arms around me, the scent of her wedding perfume mixed with tears, broke something inside me that had been holding rigid for 8 years. I held my sister tight, feeling the delicate beating of her dress against my uniform, and for the first time since walking into this ballroom, I allowed myself to truly feel the magnitude of what was happening. "You don't have to apologize," I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion. "I should have found ways to help you understand, even with the classifications, even with the restrictions." Over Emma's shoulder, I could see my father still hunched in his chair, the reality of his actions settling over him like a heavy shroud. Commander Harrison approached him slowly, his expression no longer stern but something closer to understanding, the look of a career military officer who had seen families struggle with the weight of service before. "Mr. Torres," Commander Harrison said quietly, "I've been in the Navy for 26 years. I've seen what military service costs families, and I've seen what happens when that cost isn't understood or appreciated. Your daughter has paid a price that most people can't comprehend, and she's done it willingly, because she believes in something bigger than herself. My father looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and defeated. I thought I was protecting my family's values. I thought I was doing what was right. Values? Maria stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. Sir, your daughter embodies every value the military teaches. Honor, courage, commitment, sacrifice. She spent 8 years putting others before herself, including her own family. If those aren't the values you raised her with, then I don't know what values are. Emma pulled back from our embrace, her hands still gripping my shoulders. Becca, that promotion, that position at the Pentagon, you have to take it. You've earned it. You've sacrificed everything for it. I looked down at the crumpled envelope still clutched in my hand, then around the ballroom at the faces watching us. The wedding guests who had come to celebrate Emma's new beginning had instead witnessed the potential ending of our family as we knew it. But in their eyes, I no longer saw judgment or disapproval. I saw something that looked like respect, like understanding, like the recognition that sometimes love requires sacrifice, and sometimes sacrifice requires love. Actually, I said, smoothing out the transfer orders, I think I've been sacrificing the wrong things. I turned to Commander Harrison. Sir, I need to respectfully decline this position. I've spent 8 years choosing duty over family, and I think it's time I learned how to choose both. The room went silent again, but this was a different kind of silence, not the uncomfortable tension of conflict, but the breathless pause of possibility. Commander Harrison raised an eyebrow, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Lieutenant Commander Torres, he said formally, are you requesting a transfer to shore duty? Yes, sir. Somewhere I can serve my country and still be present for my family. Somewhere I can teach my father what military values really look like. And somewhere my sister doesn't have to choose between having a wedding and having her sister there to celebrate it. Emma's face lit up through her tears. Does this mean you'll be my maid of honor after all? I looked at my father, who was slowly rising from his chair, his face a mixture of shame and tentative hope. Dad, I'm still the same person I was when I walked in here. I'm still your daughter. I'm still Emma's sister. And I'm still proud of my service and the woman I love. The question is whether you can accept all of that. He took a shaky step forward, then another, until he was standing directly in front of me. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, father and daughter, separated by years of misunderstanding, but connected by bonds that ran deeper than disagreement. I've been a fool, he said simply, and I've been a terrible father to a daughter who deserved so much better. The embrace that followed wasn't perfect. There were still years of hurt to work through, conversations to be had, trust to be rebuilt. But it was a beginning, a recognition that families, like military operations, sometimes require strategic retreats before they can advance toward victory.